Where else can she go if she doesn't stay by my side? Just as I reached out my hand to grasp the handle of the glass door, Ji Zihan's cold and somewhat indifferent voice pierced straight into my ears. In an instant my mind went blank. Today was supposed to be the first anniversary of my marriage to Ji Zihan, yet it was also the homecoming party for An Ting. Initially I was not on the invitation list, and knew nothing about this matter at all. It was not until An Ting posted photos on her moments that I suddenly realized that Ji Zihan, who claimed to be working overtime, had actually come to An Ting's party behind my back. So I rushed over in a hurry, solely intent on taking Ji Zihan away. But the moment I pushed open that door I heard him say this sentence. I slowly lowered my hand, and a faint throbbing pain spread through my chest. Jiang Xu? Suddenly a familiar female voice sounded behind me. I turned around and saw An Ting standing behind me. Her eyes were filled with a hint of curiosity as she sized me up and down. "Ah, it really is you. I thought I was mistaken. Didn't Zihan say you couldn't come because of something?" Hearing this I was taken aback for a moment. "Since you're here coming quickly." An Ting stepped forward with a slightly smug smile on her face. "It's been a long time since we last saw each other." "No need." I withdrew my hand that she had been holding and forced a smile. "I really still have things to do. I just came to take a look. I'll leave first." Stepping out of the bar, the noise in my ears finally gradually dissipated. I raised my eyes to the night sky, where only a few sparse stars were scattered across the firmament. The night wind was as sharp as a knife. I had left in such a hurry that I forgot to put on my coat, and couldn't help but hug my arms tightly. At this moment not only was my body cold, but my heart seemed to have fallen into an ice cellar. It was not until this moment that I suddenly realized that perhaps in Ji Zihan's heart the female lead would always occupy the most important position. 20 years ago I inexplicably chunyered this novel, and became a doomed cannon fodder character. The system told me that only by redeeming the suffering male second Ji Zihan in the book could I return to my original world. Thus for a full 20 years, I seemed to have become a machine that operated solely for the male second. When he was a child he was abandoned by his parents, suffering from hunger and cold. I took him back to my home and solemnly promised him that as long as I had a bite to eat, I would never let him go hungry. Later when we entered school he was bullied, and I unhesitatingly stood in front of him, shielding him from the wind and rain. Later still he met the female lead An Ting, and immediately fell in love. However, An Ting had someone else in her heart, and she loved the male lead Sheniheng. After graduation An Ting went abroad with Sheniheng. Ji Zihan was disheartened and in low spirits, while I always stayed by his side offering comfort and encouragement. Until Ji Zihan decided to start a business, I worked 3 jobs a day to fully support him. All the way to now he has become a well-known young entrepreneur in South Province. Last year the system determined that my strategy mission had been successfully completed, and I could have returned to my original world. But somehow Ji Zihan learned of the existence of the system. He proposed to me, crying and pleading with me not to leave. I looked into his eyes, as dark as the night, yet filled with love, and my heart involuntarily wavered. After all, it had been a full 20 years, almost spanning half of my life. From beginning to end there was only him by my side. How could I not be moved? So I resolutely rejected the system's proposal to return, and chose to stay in this world, and enter the marriage hall with Ji Zihan. Before the system disappeared it once said to me, "I don't understand your human emotions, but I don't think your choice is correct." At that time I was extremely firm and replied solemnly, "What does it matter if it's correct or not? I firmly believe that love can conquer all." The system responded coldly, "As you wish." The wedding was grand and solemn. Ji Zihan seemed to want to make up for all the things he owed me over the years at that moment. After marriage we once lived in harmony and respect for each other. I naively thought that such days would continue forever until the end of time. But I never expected that An Ting would return. Perhaps after the end of the story the plot had changed in ways I didn't know. What was even more unexpected was that Ji Zihan actually lied to me without hesitation, saying that he was working overtime. Completely ignoring our wedding anniversary, he turned around and ran to the female lead's banquet. Now looking back I was so confident when I rejected the system back, then yet how ridiculous I was. Looking at the pitch-black night sky in front of me my heart seemed to be tightly grasped by an invisible big hand, and the pain almost suffocated me. When I got home, it was already the early hours of the morning. I turned on the light, and the house was deathly silent. It seemed that Ji Zihan hadn't returned yet. Dragging my tired body into the house at this moment my body was as stiff as a puppet. Especially my right leg, which had been injured before a piercing pain struck. And I just wanted to wash up quickly and have a good rest. Soaking in the bathtub, my thoughts involuntarily drifted back to my past with Ji Zihan. When I was 8 years old I first met Ji Zihan. His father had an affair, embezzled the family's money, and eloped with his mistress. His mother was heartbroken, and vented all her resentment towards her husband on Ji Zihan, who resembled his father. After that she either beat or scolded him. Finally on a cold and clear morning Ji Zihan's mother chose to commit suicide. It was at that moment that I met Ji Zihan. He was wearing thin clothes, and the swirling wind and snow outside wantonly enveloped the young him, making his cheeks and hands red from the cold. Even without the task assigned by the system, how could I bear to watch a young child wandering alone in the wind and snow? Therefore, I took him back to my home. My identity in this world is that of an orphan. Fortunately, before my parents passed away, they left me an inheritance sufficient to sustain my life. Now Ji Zihan and I rely on this sum of money to eke out a living together. At that time, Ji Zihan was small, with a round face, just like a delicate and lovely porcelain doll. When I was cooking, he would assist me at my side. When I was doing the laundry, he would obediently bring water for me. And he would also carefully cut the fruits and place them in front of me. In fact, I understand in my heart that it's not that he likes me very much, but rather that in this world, I am the only one he can rely on. Will you also abandon me? Ji Zihan tilted his head back, his eyes glistening with tears, and asked me timidly. I gently stroked his head and said tenderly, "No, in this world, even if everyone else abandons you, I will never leave you behind." Upon hearing these words, Ji Zihan finally felt a sense of relief, and a faint smile finally appeared on his pitiful little face. Thinking of this, my heart ached uncontrollably once again. Yes, it was I who personally made the promise that I would never abandon Ji Zihan. So much so that when Ji Zihan later begged me to stay, this scene still flashed before my mind. One should fulfill what one has promised. Therefore, I gave up the identity of Jiang Xu, the infinitely glorious female entrepreneur in the original world, and chose to become Jiang Xu, the wife of the male second in the book. Now that I think about it, one really shouldn't be too infatuated with love, otherwise one will only end up in the pitiful situation of, where else can she go if she leaves me? Thinking of this, I held back the tears that were about to well up in my eyes and slowly closed my eyes. Filled with grievances that I had nowhere to express, I could only lie on the bed and let the time pass by minute by minute. Finally, as drowsiness gradually overwhelmed me, I heard the sound of the door opening. I didn't move, and I just felt Ji Zihan creeping onto the bed softly. He still carried a trace of the coldness from the wind and snow outside. After getting under the covers, he reached out his hand to embrace me. I instinctively dodged. "Aren't you asleep yet?" Ji Zihan's voice was a bit hoarse, and as soon as he opened his mouth, a strong smell of alcohol wafted over. Were you at the bar today?" Ji Zihan's voice carried a hint of guilt. "I thought you've been too tired recently and don't really like going out, so I didn't invite you." I just felt that my drowsiness became even stronger, and I really didn't want to respond to him. Seeing that I didn't speak, Ji Zihan asked again, "Are you angry?" "There's nothing between me and An Ting. She just came back from abroad with great difficulty, and I just went to see her. What's there for you to be angry about?" Ji Zihan's tone gradually changed from the initial guilt to impatience. "I'm already married to you. I only regard her as an ordinary friend. Stop making a fuss." I rubbed my slightly swollen temples and said wearily, "It's okay, I'm a bit tired." "Jiang Xu," Ji Zihan's voice suddenly rose a few pitches, "I'm already married to you, and I will definitely take responsibility for you. You know that I don't like women who are overly suspicious." Yes, I remembered that when he first met An Ting, I had repeatedly asked him if he liked An Ting. At that time, Ji Zihan had the same expression and told me coldly that he didn't like women who were overly suspicious. Perhaps I was distracted for a moment, and Ji Zihan leaned in and hugged me. Su, stop being willful, okay?" "Okay." I really didn't want to say another word, so I just responded dully. Ji Zihan was silent for a moment. It seemed that he also felt that I was lacking in enthusiasm and was rather boring. So he got up and walked out of the room. The room fell silent again. The empty bed made me feel much more at ease than when Ji Zihan was there. Before long, I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up the next day, the sun was already high in the sky. Ji Zihan had already left. I called Ji Zihan, but there was no answer on the other end of the phone. Putting down the phone, I was still a bit dazed and lost. My heart even kept comforting myself that perhaps it was because of the plot that Ji Zihan came into contact with the female lead again. But was it really the case? I shook my head with a bitter smile. I knew in my heart that this was just self-deception, and the sadness and sorrow in my heart could not be hidden no matter what. Yes, I had long known that the plot had already ended. Everything Ji Zihan is doing now is not because of the plot, but because he has never truly let go of An Ting. Such a cruel truth was like a sharp dagger stabbing deeply into my heart, making it almost impossible for me to breathe. Suddenly, there came the sound of the door lock turning. The next second, the door slowly opened, and Ji Zihan walked in, and behind him was An Ting. Su. Ji Zihan seemed not to expect that I was sitting on the sofa when he saw me. He was obviously taken aback. Then he hurriedly explained, "An Ting just came back from abroad and hasn't found a place to live yet. She plans to stay with us for a while." An Ting peeked out from behind him and asked hypocritically, "I'm not disturbing you, am I?" Before I could open my mouth, Ji Zihan hurriedly comforted her. "Don't talk about disturbing, just feel at ease and stay. Then I'll be at ease." An Ting walked into the room, a smug smile flashing in her eyes, completely ignoring my feelings. Looking at the scene in front of me, The pain in my heart surged like a turbulent tide, wave after wave. Ji Zihan really didn't take me into account at all. He completely disregarded the fact that I was the mistress of this house. Looking at Ji Zihan's doting expression when facing Xia Anting, I suddenly felt that everything had become insipid. Ji Zihan. I took a deep breath and slowly said, "Let's get a divorce." "What?" Ji Zihan frowned and asked me impatiently. "Jiang Xu, what are you making a fuss about again? I've already said that Anting just came back from abroad and has nowhere to live. Do you really have to threaten me with divorce?" Xia Anting immediately pretended to choke with sobs and said with a look of guilt, "I'm sorry, it's all my fault for disturbing you. I'll leave now. Don't be angry, Su. Ji Zihan hurriedly stopped her, turned his head, and looked at me with extreme impatience. "Jiang Xu, I really don't understand what you're thinking. You can't go back anyway if you divorce me. Where can you go?" After saying this, Ji Zihan seemed to realize that he had said something wrong, and his body stiffened for a moment. Subsequently, he tried to make amends. "That's not what I meant, Su. You never used to be so aggressive before." I suppressed my heartache and pushed his hand away forcefully, shouting angrily, "I'm aggressive? You brought another woman back to our bridal chamber. I sent that aggressive." "Jiang Xu," Ji Zihan's face darkened completely. "How have you become so vicious now? Don't quarrel because of me." Xia Anting quickly stepped forward, putting on a look of anxiety. "I'll go stay in a hotel first." "So you still know there are hotels to stay in?" I looked at Xia Anting and smiled coldly. "I thought the only option in your mind was to live in a married man's house." Xia Anting's eyes immediately turned red, and tears welled up in her eyes. This is my house." While comforting Xia Anting, Ji Zihan swept me with a cold gaze. "If anyone is to leave, it's you." Looking at Ji Zihan's face as cold as frost, I suddenly remembered the moment when he proposed to Mei had once said to me solemnly that everything he had was mine. At this moment, he coldly declared that this was his house and asked me to leave. Even though I tried my best to restrain my inner emotions and tried not to love him anymore, my heart still throbbed uncontrollably. At this moment, I had never regretted so deeply. I regretted staying here. And even more so, I regretted saving the man in front of me. Everything I had done for him now seemed like an absurd joke. Some people are perhaps destined to sink into the quagmire from birth and are simply unworthy of being redeemed by others. Ji Zihan, I don't have high expectations of you. I don't expect you to be a qualified lover. But at least you should act like a human being, right? Filled with intense regret, I couldn't help but sternly question him. It's freezing cold outside now. Just because he wants to let Xia Anting stay here, he intends to drive me out? How can he act like this? Forget it. With a gloomy face and a cold expression, Ji Zihan picked up Xia Anting's luggage and said coldly, "If you want to stay, stay here. We're leaving." After saying that, he and Xia Anting stepped out of the house one after another. Before leaving, he left a word. "I won't come back today. Calm down by yourself and send me a message when you've thought it through." Listening to the sound of the car starting outside, the roar of the engine seemed to be a merciless mockery of Mimi. Mind went blank instantly. I had accompanied Ji Zihan for a full 20 years. These 20 years were like a long and winding scroll, recording every bit of our lives. However, all of this couldn't compare to Xia Anting, who had only appeared for less than 2 years. I had naively thought that even if Ji Zihan was a cold stone, he should have been warmed by my long-term company and affection. But I never expected that the male second was still the male second. After all, when facing the female lead, he could always abandon me without hesitation. My thoughts involuntarily drifted back to the past. That memory was like an old movie, slowly playing in my mind. In our senior year of high school, that was the first time Ji Zihan and I met the female lead, Xia Anting. According to the original plot, the female lead should have saved the lonely and down and out Ji Zihan, and thus made Ji Zihan fall in love with her. But I came to this world and changed some tracks. The originally gloomy male second gradually grew into a sunny teenager under my company and influence. I had thought that he and the female lead would have no more intersections, but fate played a trick. He still fell hopelessly in love with the female lead, and it was love at first sight. At that time, although my heart was full of sadness and loss, I also understood that Ji Zihan was a flesh and blood person with independent thoughts. Who he liked and loved was not something I could control. During that winter vacation, at Xia Anting's suggestion, the three of us went hiking together. The coldness of the winter night was already biting, and the winter night in the mountains was even more bitterly cold. Halfway through the journey, Xia Anting accidentally slipped and quickly slid down a slope. At the moment of falling, she subconsciously grabbed me and dragged me down together. Ji Zihan frantically searched for us everywhere and finally found us shivering in a cave. Without the slightest hesitation, he immediately picked up Xia Anting, who had sprained her ankle, and turned to walk down the mountain. His eyes were full of anxiety and concern, as if there was only Xia Anting in his world at this moment. While I, who also had a leg injury, was completely ignored by him, as if I was an insignificant existence. "Ji Zihan, I'm also injured." I weakly called out behind him. Due to the leg injury, my body swayed as I walked, and every step was filled with difficulty and pain. Ji Zihan's figure stiffened slightly, and he slowly turned around and said to me, An Ting has been pampered since childhood. She's different from you. If I don't take care of her, she might die here. What about me? I looked at him in disbelief, my heart filled with despair and anger. An Ting was pampered, but I had taken good care of him since he was a child. Didn't I need to be taken care of in his eyes? I'm sorry, Su, I'll come back to pick you up after I send her down. After saying this, Ji Zihan carried An Ting on his back and left without looking back. Wearing that torn cotton-padded coat, I shivered on the wind-swept mountain path. The desolation in my heart was like a cold flame, burning fiercely in the bottom of my heart. I constantly comforted myself in my heart that this was the influence of the plot. Because of the plot setting, Ji Zihan had to save An Ting first. However, in the end, I still couldn't resist the biting cold wind and fainted on the mountain path. Fortunately, the rescue team found me in time and sent me back to the hospital at the foot of the mountain. During this period, Ji Zihan always stayed by An Ting's side and ignored me completely. It was also from that time that my right leg suffered a permanent injury. Whenever it rained or was a cold winter, my right leg would cramp with pain. That piercing pain was like a devil, constantly tormenting me all the time. Ji Zihan was well aware of this, so after he achieved success in his career and had enough money, the first thing he did was to treat my leg injury. He spent a large amount of money searching for experts everywhere, but in the end, he could only tell me to take good care of myself, and the pain could not be completely eliminated. I once thought that this was a manifestation of Ji Zihan's love, for May thought that after getting away from the influence of the female lead, he had developed true feelings for me and regretted his past actions. But now when I think about it, he might just be compensating me. After all, it was An Ting who suggested going hiking, and it was he who left me behind at a critical moment and resolutely carried An Ting away. How ridiculous all of this is. Thinking of these past events, tears involuntarily welled up in my eyes, slid down my cheeks, and dripped onto the cold ground. Beep dot. Suddenly, that familiar and cold mechanical sound rang in my mind. Before I could react, the system's voice clearly sounded in my mind. Detecting the original host's intense regret, the system's last chance selection function is activated. Please make a new choice. A continue to stay here. Be returned to the original world. I instantly froze in place, as if I had been cast with an immobilization spell. The system's cold mechanical sound echoed continuously in my mind. Pinched myself hard, feeling the clear pain. I was sure that this was not a dream. System, are you still there? I anxiously asked in my heart. The system replied, I've always been here. The host who has completed the task should have the right to make a new choice. My hand tightly clenched my palm, and my nails almost dug into the flesh. Tears blurred my vision. Ji Zihan thought that I had nowhere to go if I left him, but he was completely wrong. The system was still waiting for me, and I still had the opportunity to return to my world. Please make a choice quickly. The system's voice sounded again, urging me without the slightest hesitation. I resolutely chose to return to my original world. Once the choice is made, it cannot be changed. The host needs to handle everything, including the child in the womb. Within a week, after a week, the host will directly return to the original world. After saying this, the system disappeared again and I was completely stunned, my mind going blank. The child in the womb that the system mentioned. A child? My hand involuntarily touched my lower abdomen, and a complex emotion welled up in my heart. Was I actually pregnant? This news was like a bombshell, instantly stunning me. Originally, Ji Zihan was busy with work, and we had always been eager to have a child, but never had the right opportunity. Unexpectedly, at this time, the child suddenly arrived, but for me, it came at the worst time. I slowly stood up and dragged my heavy steps into the bathroom. I turned on the faucet and washed my face with cold water. Looking at my haggard face in the mirror, my determination to leave became even stronger. Baby, forgive Mom. Consider it that Mom is sorry for you, but Mom must go back. I can't stay in this world that makes me sad and desperate just because of you. I know that if I continue to stay here, what awaits me will be an endless nightmare. I walked out of the bathroom, suppressed the grief in my heart, packed my luggage, and then drove to the hospital. In the hospital, I made an appointment for an abortion operation as quickly as possible. 6 hours later, I lay on the operating table. The doctor, wearing a blue mask, with a hint of concern in his eyes, frowned and asked me, Are you sure you've thought it through? My hand gently stroked my stomach, and tears welled up in my eyes, but my voice was extremely firm. I've thought it through. I won't stay, and I can't keep this child either. As the syringe slowly injected the anesthetic into my body, my consciousness gradually became blurred, and finally, I fell into a deep sleep. In my dream, I seemed to return to the time when Ji Zihan was bullied for the first time. That was when we first entered junior high school. At that time, we lived in poverty. After all, the money left by our parents was not enough for us to live without worry. What's more, with Ji Zihan added, the living expenses became even greater. In order to make a living, I began to look for opportunities to earn money everywhere. However, due to our young age, many places were reluctant to hire us. In desperation, I had to take on those less respectable jobs, such as picking up garbage. Sometimes Ji Zihan would also come to help me once after school. Our classmates passed by and happened to see Ji Zihan, who was usually clean and tidy, picking up garbage with me. Children in junior high school are at an age when they start to engage in comparisons Ji Zihan, and I instantly became the targets of their ridicule and bullying. Starting from initial mockery and evolving into physical attacks later, a cruel case of campus bullying thus began. Ji Zihan had a strong sense of self-esteem and was very concerned about face since he was a child, and he simply refused to tell the teacher about it. Thus, I unhesitatingly stood in front of Ji Zihan, shielding him from harm. Those children thought that we were orphans without the support of adults, so they bullied us without restraint. However, having lived 2 lifetimes, how could I be easily bullied by a group of children in their early teens? In the office, the parents of those children arrived one after another without fear. I argued with them rationally, engaged in a fierce debate with all of them, and rendered them speechless eventually. They could only drag their children home with their ears in hand, looking dejected. From then on, no one dared to bully Ji Zihan anymore. On the way back, I said to him, family and background are not reasons for them to look down on you as long as we strive hard. No matter what others say, we are the best. I still remember the way Ji Zihan looked at me with shining eyes full of gratitude at that time. I spent 3 days resting and recuperating in the hospital after the operation. During this period, Ji Zihan didn't call me even once or send me a single message, as if I had never existed in his world. Instead, in An Ting's moments, I saw many updates with Ji Zihan's presence. Among them, the most recent photo showed the back of a man wearing an apron, who was busily working in the kitchen. The caption was, "I just came back from abroad and didn't want to order takeout fortunately. I have you the way you cook while looking at the tutorial is so cute." Yet, although Ji Zihan and I have known each other for 20 years and have been married for 1 year, he has never cooked a meal for me. Even when we were young, he only helped me wash the vegetables. I remember once when I was sick, and it was already very late. I wanted to have a bowl of hot porridge. Ji Zihan frowned and said, "I can't cook, how about waiting? I'll ask Nanny Wu to make it for you tomorrow." It turned out that he wasn't really unable to cook, but just unwilling to cook for me. Perhaps, in his heart, An Ting is the one worthy of his sincere treatment. I once foolishly thought that he had feelings for me now. It seems that it was just my wishful thinking. Maybe after experiencing so much pain, all that remains is a sense of relief. Since he likes cooking for An Ting, let him do it for a lifetime. And I will also return to my original world and become the elegant and noble Jiang Xu again. When I left the hospital, I bumped into Ji Zihan and An Ting head-on. Ji Zihan carefully supported An Ting, with a look of great concern on his face. And An Ting was touching her lower abdomen with her hand, about to enter the obstetrics and gynecology department. What? Could it be that An Ting was pregnant? I raised my eyebrows, and a complex emotion welled up in my heart. Just then, Ji Zihan looked up and saw me standing in front of him. His expression darkened instantly, and he instinctively shielded An Ting behind him, his tone full of vigilance and anger. "Are you following me?" I almost couldn't help laughing out loud and said coldly, "Are you crazy? Why would I follow you when I have nothing better to do?" "Then what are you doing here?" Ji Zihan frowned and questioned me. "This is a hospital, what else could I be doing here?" I retorted, and then looked at An Ting, who was hidden behind Ji Zihan. "But what about you? My husband is accompanying another woman to the obstetrics and gynecology department. What are you planning to do?" I spoke loudly enough for people around to hear, and they all cast curious glances at us. People's eyes swept over us, and then they started whispering among themselves. "What does that mean? Is this man the husband of the woman over there? Wow, the legal wife runs into her husband taking his mistress for a prenatal checkup. This is so exciting. These 2 people look decent, but I didn't expect them to be like this truly. One can't judge a person by their appearance." When these whispers reached our ears, An Ting's face turned pale instantly. She grabbed Ji Zihan's hand tightly, and her body swayed unsteadily. Ji Zihan was furious and glared at me viciously. "Jiang Xu, how could you become so vicious? Hurry up and apologize to An Ting." "Oh, okay." I nodded and looked at An Ting, deliberately saying, "I'm sorry, Miss Ya, I shouldn't have told the truth. Although my husband brought you here for a prenatal checkup, I believe that this child definitely isn't my husband. There must be nothing improper between you two." Piffed. People around couldn't help snickering. "Jiang Xu." Ji Zihan gritted his teeth, and the look in his eyes when he looked at me was filled with coldness and anger. So different from the way he had begged me to stay with tears in his eyes. "Ah!" An Ting, standing behind, suddenly let out a cry, then covered her lower abdomen, with a painful expression on her face. I'm in so much pain." "An Ting, what's wrong with you?" Ignoring me, Ji Zihan quickly turned around and supported An Ting. That look of anxiety was just like the one on the mountain, stabbing at my heart. Without thinking twice, he picked up An Ting and rushed towards the obstetrics and gynecology consultation room. As he passed by me, he left behind a threat. "If anything happens to An Ting and the child, I won't let you off." I gazed at Ji Zihan's hurrying back figure, and a surge of desolation welled up in my heart. Even though he was deeply in love with An Ting, I had accompanied him for 20 years after all, yet he didn't show the slightest regard for the past kindness and spoke harshly to me. At this moment, I kept asking myself in my heart how I could have fallen in love with such a disgusting man. He deserves to rot in the quagmire and is not worthy of any affection I have for him. Miss, don't be sad, it's not worth it for such a scumbag guy. A teenage girl came over, handed me a tissue and softly comforted me. I forced a faint smile and said, "Thank you." Stepping out of the hospital gate, I gently touched my lower abdomen, where a little life had once been conceived. It's a pity that Ji Zihan doesn't deserve to have this child at all, and he is even less worthy of my staying in this world for him. With these thoughts in mind, I took out my phone and sent a message to the lawyer. I asked the lawyer to draw up a divorce agreement for me as quickly as possible. Since I have made up my mind to leave, I should leave cleanly. I no longer cherish the identity of Ji Zihan's wife. Within an hour, the lawyer sent the agreement. I skimmed through it roughly. After the divorce, I could get half of his property, and I planned to donate this money to the Welfare Institute in my own name. In fact, looking back on the process of my helping Ji Zihan step by step, it would not be excessive to let him leave the marriage with nothing. But I didn't want to do that, it would only drag things out for longer at this moment. I just wanted to leave without any concerns. I signed my name on the divorce agreement, and then went straight to Ji Zihan's company. This company was founded by Ji Zihan, and me. Together I still held % of the shares, and naturally, it had to be settled clearly. These shares were of no use to me anymore, so I might as well give them to Ji Zihan, and convert them all into money. With the current fame and strength of the company, these % of the shares were estimated to be worth million yuan. When I arrived at the company, Ji Zihan hadn't come yet. Presumably, he was accompanying An Ting. The secretary, Xiao Lu, quickly served me tea and water and said, "Madam, I just called Mr. Ji. Mr. Ji will be here soon." I responded and then sat on the sofa and started looking at my phone. Before long, Ji Zihan came back. He pushed the door open, and I looked up, just meeting his gaze. There was a look of impatience and anger between Ji Zihan's eyebrows as he questioned me. "Jiang Xu, how dare you come here? I also have shares in this company, and am one of the shareholders. Why can't I come?" I immediately retorted, and this question left Ji Zihan speechless for a moment. I once thought that he loved me. Now I realized that he just thought I had nowhere to go, and was easy to manipulate. No matter how much I made a fuss, no matter what he did, I would return to his side. It's really ridiculous. "You've changed, Jiang Xu." There was a look of disappointment in Ji Zihan's eyes. "You used to be so kind, but today you embarrassed An Ting in front of everyone. Do you know that An Ting almost had a miscarriage because of your provocation? You go and apologize to An Ting with me now, and I can still forgive you." "Forgive me? There's really no need for that. What, is the child in her belly yours? You're in such a hurry. Are you going to be a father?" I sneered and took out the agreement and placed it on the table. "That's just right. I'll make room for her. Sign it. Don't let the child born be an illegitimate child." "What do you mean?" The complacent expression on Ji Zihan's face just now instantly turned gloomy. "Jiang Xu, after all these days, haven't you had enough of making trouble?" "I'm not making trouble," I said calmly. "It's clearly written in the agreement that we'll split the property equally. You'll get the real estate and the company, and I'll get the money. What on earth do you want?" Ji Zihan looked extremely impatient, reached out and rubbed his temples. "I told you that An Ting just came back from abroad, and has few friends here, so she asked me for help. I was just helping her find a place to live. Since you didn't like it, I took her away. You were so aggressive in the hospital just now, and An Ting didn't hold it against you. Isn't that enough?" As I listened, I just felt it was absurd and wanted to laugh. Right, she has no friends. Were all those people at the bar party last night strangers? Even if we assume the most lenient situation, even if she has no friends, doesn't she have family? She's not an orphan. Doesn't she have the money to stay in a hotel? Does she really have to rely on you? Since I've decided to get a divorce, I don't want to be nice to him anymore, so I might as well speak plainly. An Ting keeps saying that both you and I are her friends. Then why didn't she come to me when she had nowhere to live? What, is it that only you can meet her housing needs? Or does she just want to live with you?" Looking at Ji Zihan's increasingly non-condescending, I felt a sense of indifference in my heart. Ji Zihan stared intently at me, his eyes full of confusion and estrangement. "Jiang Xu, I've never realized that you're such a person. Just because I helped her, you're going to curse her with such vicious words?" "Vicious?" I thought for a moment and felt it wasn't excessive anyway. She has no family and no friends, so she's just like an orphan, isn't she? If she's really that miserable, I don't mind helping her. After all, in my original world, I donated tens of millions of yuan to welfare institutions every year. "Are you sure you want to divorce me?" Ji Zihan stopped arguing with me, picked up the pen from the table. "Don't regret it after leaving me." "Definitely," I replied firmly, but Ji Zihan's face looked very unpleasant as he quickly signed his name on the agreement. "Meet at the gate of the Civil Affairs Bureau at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." I picked up the divorce agreement and left with great swagger. As I left the room, I heard a loud crash coming from the office behind me. It seemed that Ji Zihan had thrown something. When I got home, looking at the signed divorce agreement, my mood was unexpectedly more cheerful. It's just a pity about my child after having a good meal. I lay on the bed and browsed through the moments as expected. An Ting had updated her moments. The picture was set against the background of a hospital, and there were two hands clasped together. I was all too familiar with that slender and fair hand. There was a small scar on it, which was left when Ji Zihan fell and got injured while learning to ride a bicycle for the first time. Moreover, there was our wedding ring on the ring finger. An Ting's caption read, "Almost had an accident today. It scared the godfather of the baby to death. Cover mouth and laugh JPG. Godfather?" I sneered and directly commented below, "We're getting divorced tomorrow. Remember to remind him to come on time, so he can be the real father." After waiting for a while and getting no reply from An Ting, I set an alarm clock and put down my phone. Soon, drowsiness overwhelmed me, and I fell into a deep sleep the next day. I had a good sleep and was woken up by the alarm clock. After getting up, I tidied myself up carefully, put on makeup, and drove straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. I arrived first before long. Ji Zihan also drove up. He was dressed in a black suit. He didn't look like he was going for a divorce, but rather like he was going to get married. "Are you really sure about this?" Ji Zihan walked towards me, looking tired and impatient. "I don't have the time to play along with your tantrum. If you think there's something between me and An Ting, I can tell you clearly that there's nothing improper between us." Before I could speak, the car window of Ji Zihan's car rolled down, and An Ting opened the door and got out. "Su." She ran over with a look of guilt on her face. "There's really nothing between me and Zihan. If you're getting a divorce from him because of this, I can vouch for him. Please don't." I quickly stopped her. "I don't care what your relationship with him is now. I just want a divorce." Upon hearing this, Ji Zihan's face turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. "Jiang Xu, you'd better think this through. If you leave me, you won't have any relatives. I have my own ways. Don't bother worrying about me." I rolled my eyes. "If we don't get divorced soon, you really won't be able to be the real father of the child." "Jiang Xu." Ji Zihan was about to say something more when he saw An Ting beside him frowning and clutching her lower abdomen. "Zihan, the baby seems to be kicking me." I glanced at her flat lower abdomen and really wanted to know, can a fertilized egg really kick? That's unheard of. Ji Zihan didn't say anything more to me with a sullen face. He walked into the Civil Affairs Bureau with me. Half an hour later, we walked out together. "If you have nowhere to go, you can stay in the house for now," Ji Zihan said with a complex expression on his face. I interrupted him directly. "No need. You were in such a hurry to drive me out before the divorce. I can't afford to live in your house." Ji Zihan's face darkened again. "Jiang Xu, do you have to be like this? Even if we're divorced, we can still be friends." I looked at him in horror. "I'm not like you. I don't like being friends with my ex." After saying that, I turned away, ignoring the unpleasant expressions on their faces. The system gave me a week now. Only 5 days have passed, and I still have 2 days to enjoy myself to the fullest. That night, I took the money I got from the divorce and went to a bar. He hired 18 male models and spent money freely. I have to say that there are really many ways for rich people to have fun. I used to be too law-abiding. These male models came in all types: mature, cute like a puppy, gentle and passionate. It's much better than facing Ji Zihan's cold face every day. Moreover, they really know how to be grateful once they get the money. They sincerely accompany me to have fun. As for Ji Zihan, all my efforts towards him were completely in vain. When I was halfway through drinking, I was a bit tipsy in a daze. I saw a man who looked very much like Ji Zihan standing in front of me. Go away, looking like Ji Zihan is really disgusting." I waved my hand impatiently, took out a stack of money, and threw it at him. "Scram, don't block my way. Gunane." The man's face became even more gloomy, as if he wanted to devour me alive. Only then did I realize that it was really Ji Zihan. "What? Aren't you supposed to be with your An Ting and the baby? What are you doing here? Jiang Xu, look at what you've become now." Ji Zihan's face was extremely ugly. He reached out his hand to pull me. "Come back with me. Aren't you ashamed?" I quickly broke free and called out to the male models. "There's a human trafficker." The male models immediately responded and drove Ji Zihan away. Some even called the police. Ji Zihan was successfully taken away. What a relief. After having a great time for 2 days, I donated all the remaining money in my hand to the welfare institution. Lying on the big bed in the 5-star hotel, the system's prompt sound rang. "Host, the time is up." I nodded. "How will I go back? Will I die or?" "It's erasure." The system's voice was emotionless. "From now on in this book, all traces of the host's existence will be erased, except for those who have had intimate contact with the host. Now the erasure begins." I listened to the system's words and slowly closed my eyes. The last sentence in my mind was, "Damn Ji Zihan. Go to hell. Sister is going back to the original world to enjoy her wonderful life."